Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and my first question this week comes from Disco Balls 69, who says, Steve, I was raised Christian and I am confirmed in the Catholic Church. My dad does not want to accept that I am an atheist and I can't prove my faith because atheism is not a religion. Please help. Well, I don't know any more about your situation than what you've alluded to in your question, so the amount of useful advice I can give you is probably very, very limited. I would suggest that unless your relationship with your father is really, really bad, like you guys just don't get along, or he's abusive or tyrannical towards you in some way, I would work on convincing him to respect your opinion rather than trying to persuade him that atheism is true or legitimate, or trying to convert him to atheism. You don't have to prove your atheism to him. You just have to convince him to accept the fact that you are an atheist. And one way you can do that is by reassuring him that even though you may not respect his particular religious beliefs, because if you're an atheist, you believe that those religious beliefs are false, you do respect his right to hold those beliefs, and you do respect him as a person, and you respect the fact that he does hold those beliefs, and that you would ask for that same respect from him. He doesn't have to be an atheist. He doesn't have to think that atheism is correct or even good, but he does have to respect the fact that you are an atheist and respect your right to be an atheist. Matt Broomfield. Steve, really liked your answer to my tarnished heroes question. I've always disliked it when people judge someone by a single character flaw, even a large one. But I've been starting to do that with Cruz et al. But surely there must be a type of behavior that you cannot see beyond, or would you still be saying, well, John Wayne Gacy was a mass-murdering pedophile, but he was kind to his mother and a good artist? Oh, sure, there are definitely things that I'm not willing to look past, or there are things that would maybe render a person so contemptible that it just wouldn't be worth it to me to defend them or in any sense. More likely, though, what usually happens in those cases is I focus on the art and not so much on the artist. For instance, the great in a cinematic sense documentarian Leni Riefenstahl. I think her talent as a filmmaker is, to me, unquestionable. But her closeness with the Nazi regime, the really troubling aspects of her life as relates to Hitler and to the Nazi regime, make it really difficult to think of her as a person in positive terms. So I just look at her art and I say, okay, there are things to admire about this as a film. There are things to admire about her from a technical level. Or from the level of a storyteller, of a documentarian. And she as a person may be absolutely horrid, but the work itself is still worthy. Logical Cake, what are your thoughts on immigration reform? I think that it's long overdue. I think that there has to be some way to create some sort of accepted legal status for people that are already here, that are paying taxes, that are working, that are sending their children to schools, that are making use of our systems, of our healthcare and our hospitals, and and paying into our system. I mean, a lot of illegal immigrants pay taxes, and make themselves as much a part of the community as they can. And if they did not have to live with that shadow of their illegal status and their possible arrest and deportation, etc., over their heads, they would probably be even more active members of our community and our society. And yeah, they came here illegally. They should not have done that. That was wrong, and we shouldn't encourage that sort of thing. But at the same time, they're here, and they're a part of our community now, and I think that's what needs to be focused on. I mean, there are things that are a little complicated that I wouldn't want to be in charge of trying to fix, like, deciding who gets to who gets to be legal and how long that should take, and dealing with the issue of, well, are they essentially jumping ahead in line? Like, what about people who come here and immigrate here legally? Are we being unfair to them because they followed the rules, and here are these guys who just sort of snuck in and we're just saying, okay, you know what, all is forgiven? I mean, that's a complicated issue. I would not want to be in charge of that. But there are some things to me that are just completely unambiguous that we should absolutely do, and I don't understand the opposition to it. And one of those things is the DREAM Act, which has been up for a vote in my own home state of Maryland and has been discussed at the federal level as well. And if you don't know, the DREAM Act essentially would make it easier for the children of illegal immigrants to attend college. Most versions of the bill have a requirement that the family have lived in the country for a certain amount of time and can prove that they paid taxes and that they made an effort to contribute to the government, to the system, and that the child, him or herself, attended school, graduated high school, attended a community college, I think is a requirement for most versions of the bill. And then if all those requirements are satisfied, then they are allowed to attend a state university and pay in-state tuition, even though technically they're not citizens and they're illegal. I think that's a great idea. I see no reason not to do that. Especially since, I mean, they would be paying in-state tuition anyway because they're living in the state. I mean, they're attending a state university in the state where they live. So if not for their undocumented status, they would be paying in-state tuition anyway. And even if you have a terrible hatred for illegal immigrants, why would you want to hold it against their children? Why would you want to deprive their children who want to seek higher education of that opportunity? It just makes no sense to me. The DREAM Act is one of the very clear-cut immigration issues that I completely support, and I really don't understand why people have a problem with it. If that one seems like a no-brainer. Some other aspects of the immigration reform issue I acknowledge as being complicated, but the DREAM Act, I just don't get why we haven't done that. I don't get why we didn't do that years ago. This is 3D. Regardless of opinion on marijuana use and users, do you think a well-regulated and controlled legal form of marijuana should be available for people who are old enough to make responsible substance use choices the way alcohol and tobacco have been? That is actually a really, really great, succinct way of stating pretty much my exact position on marijuana. I think treating it like tobacco and alcohol is the way to go. I don't think it should be just blanket, legalized so that anybody can get it. I think it should be regulated. It should be controlled at the federal level. It should be age limited, etc. But yeah, I see no reason. Once those requirements are met, I see no reason for people to be arrested, thrown in jail for using marijuana. It makes no sense to me at all. I'm not a user. I've never used it. I've never wanted to use it. But I just don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that we should treat it like we treat tobacco. What you said is almost word for word my own position. The ODog86, do you think film critics are biased towards certain genres of films? I know all films are subjective, but sometimes I think critics bash films just to be negative. Like to hear your thoughts. It depends on the critic, and it depends on how your own taste lines up with that critic's taste as to how you'll evaluate their opinion. I mean, the job of a film critic is not to bash, and I think most professional film critics, whose work I admire and look to, whether I agree with their opinions or not, are not bashers. Even someone like Armand White, who is a very contrarian film critic. I mean, his opinion very, very rarely will line up with the popular opinion of a given film. And sometimes it seems like he's doing that on purpose to be a contrarian. But his reviews are always very, very articulate and very well argued. And it's difficult to just dismiss him as a basher. And even if he is trying to just sort of troll and be contrarian for the sake of it, he's at least doing a very good job of it. He's at least taking the time to construct really complicated, really compelling and plausible arguments defending his contrarian taste. A good film critic is someone who is able to articulate his or her opinion about a film. That's what a film critic does. That's the function of a film critic, to facilitate conversation, to inform based on their taste, to explain why they think a film works or doesn't work. It's not about bashing. It's not about cheerleading. I mean, sometimes it is. There have been critics, of course, who have given positive reviews to films for, you know, less than honest reasons, because the studio asked them to, or because they got some benefit, or they were promised, you know, FaceTime with a star, etc. And I'm sure there have been many film critics who have given negative reviews to movies because they have something against one of the actors in them, or because they're burned out on a particular genre, etc. But it depends on the critic, whether or not you agree with what a film critic says depends as much on your own personal taste as on a film critic's taste. I mean, earlier this week I did a Google Hangout with 4 friends where we talked about Man of Steel, and it turned out I didn't take a census of everybody's opinion before we did the Hangout, but it turned out that we all really didn't like the movie. And we're just amateur film critics, but we were functioning as film critics. We're talking about the movie and analyzing it and sort of deconstructing it and critiquing it, and none of us liked the movie. And a few people commented on the video complaining that we didn't like the movie, and they said things like, well, you didn't talk about any of the positive aspects, or all you did was talk about the negative stuff. And I'm sorry, but we just didn't like the movie. You know, I mean, we didn't find very many positive aspects to talk about. We did talk about the things about it that we did like, but there just weren't very many of those things. Our overall consensus opinion was that it is a bad movie. That's just our honest opinion. And that's a film critic's function, to give the honest opinion. Not to say, yeah, this movie is terrible, but let me go out of my way to big it up a little bit and make it sound a little better. That's not a film critic's job. It's not a film critic's job to be fair and balanced. It's a film critic's job to be honest. And if you really like a movie that a film critic doesn't like, it might come off to you as bashing, but I assure you most of the time that's not what it is. It's a critic articulating his opinion of a movie and why he feels that way. Firefly 4F4, while you've commented heavily on the Star Trek and DC movies, I can't recall you mentioning the Marvel movies except in passing, such as preferring the Ang Lee Hulk to the 2008 film. Have you watched them, and if so, what is your general opinion of each, and in particular Iron Man 3, of which you may know I am not a fan? I have not actually seen Iron Man 3 yet. I have not seen any of the Iron Man movies in theaters. Iron Man, for whatever reason, is always something I've just waited until it comes out on video. So I probably won't see Iron Man 3 for a little while yet. In general, I like the Marvel movies. I don't think that they're quite at the level artistically of The Dark Knight or Superman Returns, or indeed of Ang Lee's Hulk, which is sort of the redheaded stepchild of that franchise, just like Superman Returns is sort of looked upon that way about Superman. I like the Marvel movies. I think they're great popcorn movies. I think that the best of them, which I would say would be probably Iron Man and the Avengers, the best of them are good adventure movies, good action movies with wit and creativity and charismatic performances. I love Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I think he carries his films and carries the Avengers as well. And as I said in my review of the Avengers last year, I mean, I like it for what it is. I think it's a great popcorn movie. At times it reminds me a little bit of Ghostbusters. I mean, it sort of feels, at its best, in its finest moments, it feels like an action comedy, and a really well done one, a really great balance of action and comedy and pathos. Great performances, great juggling of the characters, and great interaction between all the actors. So yeah, in general, I like the Marvel movies. And as I mentioned in my Man of Steel review, seeing as how Man of Steel very obviously was aping those Marvel movies, I wish that it had done a better job. I wish, in a way, if it's going to copy the Marvel movies, I wish it had done a better job. And it had been a fun, clever, enjoyable film like the Avengers was, like Iron Man was. Yeah, the Marvel movies are great. And I give them kudos for this, too. They committed to doing the Avengers thing, to building up a franchise and doing like the movie version of the Marvel Universe where the characters would appear in each other's films and they'd each do their little individual things and then build up to a big team up. A lot of people were skeptical about that. A lot of people thought that would never happen. They wouldn't be able to do that, either because You know, nobody would go see a Thor movie. Nobody would go see a Captain America movie. Like the individual films themselves wouldn't be commercially viable enough to justify the Avengers. But God damn it, it worked. They did it. You know, they did the Thor movie. They did the Iron Man sequels. They did Captain America. And then they had them come together in the Avengers. And motherfucker, if it didn't work like crazy, it was great. They pulled it off. I don't know if they'll be able to do it again. I mean, they're sort of in the rebuilding phase now where they're pushing toward the next Avengers movie. I don't know if it's going to work as well the second time. History says probably not. But the first time, man, absolutely. Kudos to that. They have a right to be proud of that. Not just because the movie made $1 billion, but because creatively it worked. It was a lot of fun. It was really exciting. It was a really entertaining film. And a really great payoff to the build of those individual films. David Landon, Steve, for those of us that aren't film production buffs, can you help explain how screenwriter, producer, director, and studio function in most movies? What are their roles? For instance, if the director doesn't like a script, can he or she just change it? Well, it depends. I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. It depends on the project, it depends on the studio, it depends on the particular writer and producer and director you're talking about. I mean, some screenwriters actually have enough clout that they can demand a great deal of influence on the film. Some producers are really interested in the story and in the creative aspect and will take a very active role in developing a story. They'll work with the writer, they'll work with the director. And some producers will let the director handle that and will see their role as making the director's vision happen. You know, a lot of times a producer is seen as, I mean, literally he's the producer. He is in charge of the production. He's in charge of getting the budget together. He's in charge of making sure that they have the locations that they need, that the actors that they wanted are going to be there. And he takes charge of sort of the business side of making the movie, and the creative bit is left to the director and the writer. But it's not always like that. A lot of times a producer and a director and a writing team will work very, very closely on the story of the film. A lot of times a director will take a script from a writer that he hasn't really worked with very closely and will kind of do as he wants with it. You know, some directors view scripts as suggestions, you know, as like just sort of a template that they can then take and allow them and the actors to expand on or change as they feel is necessary or appropriate. Other directors like to shoot a script as close to as written as possible, and more often I think than anything, directors will go back to the writer and say, I really like this and this and this, but can we change this, and is there something we can put here? And you know, at its best, it's a collaborative process. The general roles and how limited they are, or you know, how far they encroach into each other's territory. Again, it depends on the people involved, on the studio involved, etc. The ideal situation to me is that the director has final say over all the creative stuff. I mean, even though I am a writer, I think the director should be the author of a film, and the director should have the final say, the final veto in terms of story. The film should be the film the director wants to make. It doesn't always work out that way. A lot of times, especially within the studios, it doesn't work out that way at all. A lot of times, even today, directors are just sort of hired to make a movie. But ideally, it's the director's movie. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's, in my opinion, that's the way it should be. Good Jesus, okay. So, the Thunder's getting tired of hearing me prattle on, so let's push on to the end of this, shall we, with
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Nish Brown, front to back or back to front? You said no subject was off limits. Back to front, because they don't call it the taint for nothing. Hey, perfect SSJ4. Hey Steve, how do you feel about Disney buying the Star Wars franchise and JJ directing Episode 7? I'm not a huge Disney fan at all, but at this point I think anyone is better than Lucas, creatively speaking, for Star Wars. And I think J.J. Abrams directing Episode 7 is awesome. I'm a J.J. Abrams fan, so I'm looking forward to seeing his Star Wars movie. And on a personal note, just because I know it'll piss off some Star Wars fans, I hope he lens flares the shit out of it. Puckerings, have you ever considered doing an atheist reads the Bible? Then you could do the Quran, etc., etc. That could keep you going for years. I thought of that actually, but I think there are a few YouTubers, really good YouTubers, that are doing something similar to that already. For instance, Bob Smeerfak doing Bob's Notes on the New Testament. That stuff is awesome, and I really don't think I could improve on that. If you want to do an atheist reads the Bible, I would recommend going to Bob Smeerfak's YouTube channel and checking out Bob's Notes, because that is amazing. Fleet Warrior 75, Steve, Mayo or Miracle Whip? Mayo. Although I don't mind a good Miracle Whip every now and then. I enjoy the tangy zip from time to time. Radical Bacon, what would happen if Rebecca Watson and Thunderfoot got in the same elevator? I would guess the most awkward, unfulfilling hate sex in the history of mankind. 0835 SIBO, I like the way you used your insurance policy number as your username. What's your opinion about Red Letter Media's videos, reviews? I love them. I think they're hilarious. I've watched the Star Trek and the Star Wars ones so many times, I can't even count. Sometimes I'll put them on just for something to watch because they're always funny. And really insightful, too. He's a good film critic, Mike Stacklasa. He's not, I mean, he's hilarious as a comedian as Mr. Plinkett, but he's a really good film critic as well. John Torrance 67, have you ever had a drug or alcohol problem? No, I have never even used a drug, an illegal drug, and I've never been more than an occasional drinker, so no. Bogdan Morrow, Dawkins or Hitchens? Why? Gotta go with Hitchens because he's a better writer and he's funnier, but it's close. Dawkins is pretty much irreplaceable. David Fusilier, have you ever felt burnt out by... David Fusilier, do you ever feel burnt out by the atheist movement? Drama, backbiting, etc. No, but probably because I don't pay any attention to any of that. I tune all of that shit out. It doesn't interest me, I don't care, I don't pay attention to it. So I'm not burnt out on it. Hey, that's it for the lightning round, that's it for the questions. Before I leave you for this week, let me do a shout out. And the shout out this week goes to a really awesome channel, Venaloid. Venaloid, I just watched one of his videos from a few months ago where he responded to William Lane Craig's opinion on gay marriage. Great video. He has a lot of really thoughtful, insightful vlogs, sort of video essays about atheism and Christianity and all kinds of interesting stuff. You should really check out Venaloid's channel if you haven't, and particularly I would recommend a video he put it up in April, but for some reason I just watched it a few days ago, on same-sex marriage and William Lane Craig's opinion on same-sex marriage. It is just terrific. Check out Venaloid's channel. Very much worth your time and your subscription if you haven't watched it and you haven't subscribed. That's it for this week. I will be back again next week to do this, of course, provided that you ask me some questions, because in order for me to make these videos, you have to ask. So please leave a comment on this video asking me any question, any subject you want me to talk about, anything you want to hear my opinion on, anything you want to ask me, anything you want to know. No subject is off limits. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly and inconsequential. Please leave a comment, ask me a question, and I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next video. And just a reminder, if you have asked a question before and I haven't answered it in the video, please feel free to ask it again. If you ask it enough times, I might take the hint and actually answer it one of these times. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for asking so many great questions that I can't possibly include them all in one of these videos. And I appreciate it, and I will see you next week.